Our first picture in our parasternal long axis is an overall image with our depth increased. We want to rule out a pericardial and a pleural effusion. From here, we're going to decrease our depth so that we have a good chamber-focused image, making sure that our left ventricle is elongated and not foreshortened. Next, we're going to do our left ventricular measurements, ensuring that we're not foreshortening that LV. We want to freeze the image and frame back to find in diastole, making sure that both the aortic and mitral valves are closed. We're going to activate the measurement package. We want to close out of the generic folder and go into dimensions. We're going to start with LVD at the anterior ventricular septum. Through the LV cavity and the posterior wall. We'll store this image. From here, we want to activate scroll so that we can find in systole from the same cardiac cycle. So we're going to hit trackpad twice to activate scroll. Once we find in systole, ensuring both the aortic valve and mitral valve are still closed, we're going to hit trackpad again to activate M&A package. You notice the system's already moved down to systole, so all we have to do is come up here and measure the internal dimension of our LV. Once you place that second caliper, we'll store this image and go back to live scanning. From here, we want to zoom up on the aortic valve. We're going to freeze and find mid-systole. Activate our measurement package, and we're going to measure the LVOT diameter. From here, we'll unfreeze, staying in a zoomed image of that aortic valve, and we're going to turn color on. Next, I'm going to hit 2D to come back out of zoom and turn color off. I'm going to focus in on my ascending aorta. So all I want to do is move my transducer up just slightly a rib space. After that, I'm going to come back to my overall parasternal long axis and focus in on my left atrium and my mitral valve. I'm going to take an overall 2D picture of this and then turn color Doppler on. And hit 2D to go back to live scanning. From our parasternal long axis view, we want to move into our right ventricular inflow tract. All we're going to do is angle the transducer down inferiorly and tilt it, the head of transducer, up towards his head to bring in the right ventricle, right atrium, and tricuspid valve. We want to take an overall 2D image of this. Place color Doppler over the tricuspid valve and right atrium. From here, we're going to activate the cursor, place that right through the tricuspid valve, and we're going to go into continuous wave Doppler. And we're looking for tricuspid regurgitation, which will be below the baseline. From the parasternal long axis view, we're going to move into a parasternal short axis by rotating the transducer clockwise to 2 o'clock and angling the probe a little inferior to bring in an overall short axis at the aortic valve level. We want to take an overall 2D image of this, and then we're going to zoom in on the aortic valve. We'll take a 2D picture of this and then place colored Doppler over the aortic valve. From here, I'm going to hit 2D to go back to my overall short axis view. I'm going to tilt the transducer to focus in on the pulmonic valve. I'm going to decrease my sector width and tilt the sector towards the pulmonic valve, taking an overall 2D image and then placing color Doppler over that valve. I'm going to hit 2D to turn color off. And now I want to move my sector width over to the other side to interrogate the tricuspid valve. Again, taking an overall 2D image. I'm going to turn color on and place it over the tricuspid valve. I'm going to activate my cursor, placing that through the valve and going into continuous wave Doppler. Looking for tricuspid regurgitation. From here, I'm going to hit 2D. I'm going to reset my sector width and sector tilt. Next, we're going to want to do a short axis of our left ventricle at the papillary muscle level. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to angle my transducer downwards towards the table to bring in a short axis of my LV. I'm going to continue to keep angling down to get to mid of my LV and a little bit further to bring in the apex. For our apical 4-chamber view, my notch is towards 3 o'clock, towards the bed, and I'm just below the patient's left breast. I want to take an overall 2D image of my apical 4-chamber. Next, I'm going to decrease my depth to get an LV focused view. From here, I want to get a good LV focused image because we're going to measure the LV volume. First, we're going to freeze and frame back to find in diastole. We want to make sure that our mitral valve remains closed. I'm going to activate the measurement package, close out of my dimensions folder, open up my volume folder under biplane, and I'm going to start with in diastolic volume of my apical 4-chamber. I'm going to trace the blood tissue interface of the LV. I'm going to set once and adjust my length to ensure that it's perpendicular to the width. I'm going to image store this picture. The machine already knows it's time to scroll to find in systole. So I'm going to use my trackpad to find in systole from the same cardiac cycle. I'm going to hit trackpad to switch to measurement and analysis package. I'm already activated on in systole. So I'm going to place my caliper at the annulus and again trace that blood tissue interface. setting once to adjust the length, and setting again to image store this picture. From here, I'm going to go back live to 2D. I want to increase my depth to go back to an overall 4-chamber. And I want to do chamber-focused imaging now on my left atrium and my mitral valve. I'm going to take a 2D picture of this. From here, I'm going to activate my cursor, placing it on the mitral valve leaflet tips, and I'm going to go into pulse wave Doppler. I'm going to adjust my scale and move my baseline down. From here, I'm going to activate the measurement package. I'm going to go into mitral valve, and I'm going to activate E and A velocity. I'm going to place my caliper at the peak E wave, drop down for decel slope, and mark peak A wave, and image store. From here, I'm going to hit 2D. Still focusing on my left atrium and mitral valve, I'm going to turn on color Doppler to evaluate for any mitral regurgitation. I'm going to image store this picture. And then I'm going to activate my cursor again through that mitral valve and go into continuous wave Doppler. Freeze and image store this Doppler picture. From here, I want to keep on a chamber-focused image of my LA, and I want to freeze, scroll back to find in systole, where my atrium is at its largest diameter. I'm going to go into my measurement package, close out this folder, go into volume, left atrium volume, and I'm doing my apical 4-chamber. Set my cursor, trace the blood tissue interface of my left atrium. Setting once to adjust the length, and image store. From here, I want to focus on the right side of my apical 4-chamber of the RV and RA. So all I'm doing is just tilting my transducer medial on the patient to bring in a right-sided focused image. I want to take an overall 2D image of this. Next, I'm going to place my color Doppler over the tricuspid valve. Activating the cursor, I'm going to place it through the tricuspid valve, going into continuous wave to look for any TR. From our apical 4-chamber to move into an apical 5, I'm going to rotate counterclockwise my index marker to about 1 o'clock, and I'm going to angle towards the patient's head to bring in a good apical 5-chamber view. I want to take an overall 2D image of this. Next, I'm going to place my color Doppler over the aortic valve, looking for any aortic regurgitation. From here, I want to turn color off, activating my cursor, and I want to place this cursor, the sample volume gate, at the same location where I measured my LVOT diameter and parasternal long axis. I'm ensuring that my cursor is parallel to flow, and from here I'm going to activate pulse wave Doppler. I want to move my baseline up to get a good velocity of my LVOT. From here, I'm going to activate the measurement folder, go into aortic valve. I'm on LVOT trace, and I'm tracing the modal portion of the velocity. And then I'm going to drag over to the beginning of the next cycle for heart rate and image store. I'm going to go back to 2D. Staying in that good apical 5-chamber view, I'm going to activate my cursor again through the aortic valve, and I'm going to go into continuous wave Doppler. I want to adjust my scale . Freeze. I'm going to go back into my measurement package and activate my aortic valve trace. And for this part, we're tracing the outer dense velocity. Dragging over to the next cycle to mark heart rate and image store. From my apical 5-chamber view, I want to go back to a 4-chamber. I'm going to rotate my transducer counterclockwise to go into an apical 2-chamber view with my index marker towards 1 o'clock. I want to take an overall 2D image of my apical 2-chamber. I want to adjust my depth to get a good LV focused view. I'm going to freeze and frame back to find in diastole. I'm going to gain up. Going into our measurement package, I'm going to close out of my left atrial volume, go into volume, biplane, and I'm going to start with my apical 2-chamber in diastolic volume. Again, tracing the blood tissue interface of my LV. Setting once to adjust my length. I'm going to image store. From here, I want to find in systole within the same cardiac frame. I'm going to hit trackpad to go back into my measurement analysis package. The system already knows I'm ready for in systole in my apical 2-chamber. Setting once to adjust my length and image store. From here, I'm going to go back to 2D. I'm going to increase my depth to go back to an overall 2-chamber. But now I'm going to be focusing on my left atrium and mitral valve. I want to freeze, frame back and find in systole. And I'm going to activate my measurement package again, closing out of the biplane, back into volume, left atrium volume, and my apical 2-chamber view. Set once to adjust my length and image store. From here, going back to 2-chamber, I'm going to turn on color Doppler over that mitral valve. activate my cursor, place that through the valve, and go into continuous wave Doppler and image store. From my apical 2 chamber, I'm going to continue to rotate counterclockwise to go into an apical 3 chamber. My index marker is now towards 11 o'clock. And I'm going to take an overall 2D image of this. Next, I want to decrease my depth to focus in on the left ventricle. From here, I'm going to increase my depth again to go back to my overall 3 chamber. And I'm going to turn on color Doppler over my mitral and aortic valve. For our subcostal view, my notch is towards 3 o'clock. I'm right below the patient's xiphoid process. And I have an overall apical 4-chamber view in a subcostal window. I'm going to image store this. From here, I want to look at my IVC, so I'm going to rotate my index marker counterclockwise to 1 o'clock. I'm going to angle inferior to bring in the IVC. And I'm going to evaluate for collapsibility and image store. From here, I'm going to turn color Doppler on over my IVC and hepatic veins and image store this.